Hello, and welcome to Computer Science for Humans. Today, we are going to react to a video that I started watching and then I wanted to share it with you guys because it's pretty good. We're going to talk about how programmers flex on each other, and I think it's going to be pretty good. This video is from Fireship, with just a tiny little channel, you know, only like 4 M subscribers. I don't know what the M stands for, but you know. Make sure to give them some love for this. Fireship is called How Programmers Flex on Each Other, and in keeping with my trend of being only at the bleeding edge of current events, this is a mere 2 years ago that this video came out. But it seems cool. It's got a bajillion views, and yeah, we're gonna watch it together. Let's see what this guy has to say. As a side note, I'm not gonna be just watching the whole thing. I'm gonna be cutting it to the interesting points that I have stuff to say about, because if you want to see the whole video, you should just watch it on their channel.
Many years ago, in a story I just made up, I was architecting some highly scalable infrastructure when a staff engineer walked into my cubicle and said,
"Hey buddy, that's a cute VS Code theme you've got there."
"Oh, thanks. It's a synthwave with power mode enabled." Before I could explain more though, he cut me off and
I didn't notice. Hold on. It autofilled stupid.
"Oh, thanks.
Okay, what is this code? Hold on, synthwave. Date, full year. If the full year is 1984, and the current location is a rooftop, and the weather conditions are torrential rain, then await the night." This is so good. Oh, that is so good, though. Call it Sax Solo equals new saxophone, sax solo.play. That's amazing, dude. I love that.
You see that bug on line 234, right?
I said, "No, that's impossible, sir. We have 100% test coverage on this code."
Well, I'm gonna pull it up in NeoVim on my Arch desktop, and I'll send you a PR for that.
5 minutes later, I get a notification in Slack that the PR came through. All tests are passing, with 469 lines of code removed, and just one commit message that read,
"Optimized suboptimal code."
So it's really funny. This actually happened to me. Almost identically. We weren't in cubicles though. It was still relatively recent after college, so I hadn't been in the workforce all that long. And I was still relatively new. I was brand new to the team, and I think they had hired me like a week ago. And I was put in charge of something, and I submitted my first pull request, and basically I hedged a lot. I basically said like, "Hey guys, this is the kind of thing I'm thinking of doing. What do you think about it?" And the senior devs on the team just like lambasted me for it. They literally like, I sent a very simple, very short pull request, essentially saying like, "Is this the kind of thing that you guys want me to do?" And they wrote like a book, like 3 different guys wrote a book, basically just chastising me for everything that they could think of that I'd done wrong. And it was a rough experience. That was not a fun place to work. But yeah, so it's funny that he mentions this as his first example, because this almost exactly happened to me when I was still new.
I then looked out the window and saw him driving away in his Tesla. It was at that moment that I realized
He did not have a Tesla. His boss did, though.
I had been flexed upon. If you're a programmer who's feeling down, one of the best ways to boost your ego is to flex on other developers. For programmers, there's only 2 states of being: imposter syndrome or superiority complex.
I wish this was less true, honestly. I feel like this is the common scenario. There is a middle path that is not either of those evil towers, but it definitely, you got to work to get there. It is not easy. There's not a clear path there. Yeah, this is very, very true, sadly. Dude, guy's jacked. I mean, I want to look like that when I code. Maybe with my shirt on, but you know, although he might be on steroids because he is bald. I don't know. He might just be bald, but I know steroids a lot of time can make you bald.
First up, we've got the complexity flex. An idiot admires complexity, a genius admires simplicity.
This is fantastic, and this took me a long time to really understand. I think this concept is one reason that the clean code, I don't know, paradigm, movement, whatever you want to call it, is starting to lose a lot of favor, at least among my generation and younger, because clean code, which I hate that it's called that because that's a keyword, because I like the idea of code being clean, but it's a keyword. So anyway, I think the core idea of clean code is cool. It's basically like you want to abstract things to a point where you don't have to know details of how it works. You just have to know the overall concept of how the pieces are supposed to fit together. The problem with clean code, though, is, at least in practice, is I think a lot of the time what ends up happening is you end up with so many levels of abstraction, and Primogen talks about this all the time. You end up with so many layers of abstraction that you kind of just lose context of what's actually happening in the code. So I do think think there's a middle ground. Like, obviously some abstraction is usually good, but there's definitely a balance there. And I know for me, Java was my first programming language. And when I learned JavaScript, I learned it class-based and object-oriented and stuff. Same with Python. Object-oriented programming very much tends toward complexity over simplicity because it's trying to abstract the details of the problem away. As a side note, if you want a video talking about abstraction, let me know. I'm kind of just throwing it out as jargon right now. So definitely let me know if you want to have a video where I talk about that in more detail and we just kind of go over what really is abstraction. I might do a video like that anyway, but especially if you guys want it. But yeah, I think this is a really true statement. It's also important to note that simplicity is not the same thing as conciseness or concisity. Concisity? I don't know how you'd say that. But conciseness, meaning like just one line of code, doesn't necessarily mean it's simple. Simple can mean it's 20 lines of code instead of 5, but because of the way you organize the 20 lines of code, it's way easier to read, the purpose is more clear, and the steps you're taking are more clear. And a lot of time, when you make the steps you're taking more clear, you can actually reduce the number of steps you need in the first place. But yeah, I like this a lot.
Think of how stupid the average person is, and then realize half of them are stupider than that.
That's pretty good. The question is, which side of that are you on? You know? Because everyone who heard that was thinking, oh yeah, wow, there's so many more people dumb than me, but there's a 50% chance you're on the dumb side, myself included. You know what I mean? And I think it's also worth noting that being dumb or being smart usually is localized to a particular subject. Like, I've got friends who are really smart at certain things and really dumb at certain things. And I think I'm pretty smart at certain things and I'm pretty dumb at certain things too. My wife can vouch for that one. But yeah, it's interesting. The whole idea of smarts is very intriguing to me, and I think it's often misunderstood. I don't think it's as genetic as people tend to think. Like, I don't think smart is something you're born as. I think it's something you learn. And I think stupidity is a choice, not a natural byproduct of who you are. Let me know if you want to see a video on that, because that's a deep rabbit hole right there. But I feel like intelligence and the subject of intelligence is actually really relevant to programming, because I don't know about you, but for me, the first time I tell anybody I'm a programmer, one of the main responses I get, other than "can you fix my printer," is, "Oh, so you're pretty smart then." And I'm like, I don't know, I'm just a guy. Like, being a programmer doesn't mean I'm smart. I know a lot of dumb programmers. I've been a dumb programmer many, many times. I think stupid is a choice. And I think the question you're obligated to ask is, am I choosing stupidity right now? And if so, you should stop. The answer to that question is not always obvious, which is why you need people around you who can help you see the truth of the situation when you are choosing stupidity. But that's a whole other thing. If you want a video on that, let me know. I enjoy philosophy, so maybe philosophy talks could be fun.
Take something simple, like a perfectly functional JavaScript function, then add TypeScript to it while preaching the virtues of end-to-end type safety.
I hate TypeScript. I think it is a very misguided attempt to make Java less of a ball of duct tape. And I think the reason it's misguided is because the way they do it is by duct taping a type system onto the giant ball of duct tape that is JavaScript. If you love TypeScript, please tell me why in the comments. And just so you know, if you like TypeScript, that's fine. I don't care. Like, feel free to like it. I'm not saying you're dumb for liking it. I think the idea of putting TypeScript into Java in the first place was, I don't know if counterproductive is the right thing to say. It definitely has its use cases, but I feel like it adds a level of complexity to JavaScript that JavaScript is not equipped with the infrastructure to handle. I think that's a good way to summarize it, but definitely feel free to argue with me in the comments below. I actually really like it when you guys disagree with me. It gives me great conversation topics and stuff like that. So yeah, but yeah, I do not like TypeScript at all. It might be better if it didn't use Java syntax, but I know they use Java syntax to bring Java people over into JavaScript a little easier. Because I think that's the whole purpose of TypeScript, is basically, if you're used to object-oriented programming, here's a way you can do JavaScript, and it's still object-oriented programming, except it's not. It's still regular JavaScript under the hood. The typing system is a complete facade. That's what I don't like about it, is the typing system is a complete facade. All of the JavaScript quirks are still just right there. So it doesn't actually remove any of the negatives about JavaScript. It's just like you've taken a ball of duct tape and painted it to look like a basketball, and then you start playing basketball with it, but it's not a basketball, it's a ball of duct tape. Anyway, hopefully the analogy makes sense. Again, let me know if you want a full video on that topic. It's a very interesting one.
Abstract factory singleton adapter decorator proxy.
This is such a good example of exactly what I was talking about earlier with how clean code tends to over abstract things. And I know that's exactly what he's going for too, is it's the confused sipping. I just saw that. That's so good. But yeah, like that is the problem with clean code is you end up with stuff like a...
From there, refactor it into an abstract factory singleton adapter decorator proxy.
that you end up with that and it's like, oh my goodness. Here's the thing that I think clean code doesn't really factor in is the human element, specifically in the fact that in a corporate environment, which is where most programming happens, you could argue startups are separate from corporate. I'm going to lump them in together for now because I think they end up having very similar environments, just different like genres. They're like different dialects of the same language almost. But in a corporate environment, what I think clean code doesn't really account for super well, personally, is a very common thing is that a team is building a product or an app or whatever you want to call it, and they use clean code to do all of this abstraction stuff. The people building it start to have a decent idea of a mental map of where everything is. This is where the singleton is. This is where the factory is. This is where the decorator is. This is why they're like this. But then someone quits, or the boss switches and he decides he wants a full new team, or the project gets canceled and then restarted later, or the whole goal of the project shifts. And now all of a sudden you have all this abstraction, and either the context shifts and now the abstraction is not the correct kind of abstraction for the project you're doing, which that's more of an issue with the project development life cycle than with the coding itself. More commonly, you'll have a situation where by the time you're 80% of the way done with the product, it's like a totally different team. And this doesn't always happen, but it happens enough to where I really just think that the amount of abstraction makes it really hard for new people to come in and actually learn a mental map of where everything is, because you have to learn it in like 4 dimensions. It's not just like, okay, here's the thing that does this, here's the thing that does this. It's like, okay, so we have a system for doing this, but you have to use a factory to make it, and you have to use a singleton to manage all the factories, and then, stuff like that. And it's like, it just gets out of hand really easily. I do wonder, and let me know what you think on this in the comments, I do wonder how much of it being difficult and complicated comes from the people implementing the software patterns, the design patterns, not understanding the pattern super well and the purpose of the pattern. Like they can do the pattern and they can see something as like, oh, I could turn this into, say, a factory or a singleton or a proxy or whatever the other ones he said were. There's a bajillion of them. A state machine is another example, although that one's one of my favorites personally. And while yes, that situation might look like the kind of thing you can use one of these patterns for, that doesn't mean that pattern is better for the project as a whole. It's kind of a missing the forest for the trees scenario where you see a few trees together and you're like, oh, those would make a great glade, which is just a group of trees, right? Or a stand if you're old-fashioned and British. A group of trees. And so you group them together and you build a little wall around it and everything. You're like, cool. And what you miss is that you just built a wall around something that actually is part of a bigger section of the forest, and now it's blocked off, and so you have to use all these extra paths to get in and out. Hopefully the analogy is making a little bit of sense. Again, let me know if you want a full video talking about this, or if you disagree with anything I'm saying, any of that, or if you agree. I like that too. It's nice to have nice comments from time to time. But yeah, all that to say, I think that's one of the biggest problems with the clean code movement is you end up with stuff like this. And a lot of the time, that's because people are over applying clean code principles, which I think from hearing Uncle Bob talk about it in kind of a more debate-ish context. If I remember, I'll put the link down below. He talked to the Primogen when it was very, very interesting because they have very different paradigms for programming. But hearing him talk about it, I think that level of abstraction complexity is actually a feature, not a bug for the system, which is why I've started not liking the clean code movement as much the more I age as a programmer. I think it wants a little bit more complexity than is usually appropriate, in my opinion. Again, let me know in the comments if you disagree.
And when nobody understands that, just tell them they've never seen clean code before.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
And should have read the Gang of Four book, making them think you're some kind of programming god.
But really, though, that is kind of what happens. What is this? CTO who can't code, me getting a raise for egregious over-engineering. That's true, though. I have seen that happen, too. I've worked at places where there was this one guy. It was the same job I mentioned before, but there was a guy who he had 2 separate tickets in our Jira board, because we used the Jira ineffectively, in my opinion. But it was an attempt at organization. He had 2 different commits checked out on his personal computer, both of which were mission critical for the release that was coming up in 2 weeks. And he was halfway through both of them, so he could couldn't push them back to GitHub. And he went on vacation for 2 weeks. And he was the guy getting raises. Like, this happens. This is real. That's the crazy thing to me, is this is real.
CTO who doesn't know how to code will be so impressed that you'll get a huge raise. And that brings us to the money flex. The dude in the cubicle next to him, though, did a better job negotiating a salary and makes $225K a year.
Dude, 225 as a junior dev would be amazing. Like, if you're in that position, then you build your savings account now. Enjoy it while you can, because that usually does not happen long. Obviously, like, that's kind of the point. This is a joke, but like, seriously, as a junior dev, if you're making, I'd say if you're in corporate and you're making more than 80,000, I think you've got it decently, like, you're in a decent position. Now, I don't know your living expenses and stuff, and there's all sorts money is complicated, right? But like, people think that programming as a career pays a lot higher than it does on average, because they look at things like Google and Netflix and they think that's the norm. And even at Google and Netflix, it's probably not quite as high as you would expect, especially if you account for the price of living near their facilities and stuff. But like, I've known programmers who make $40,000 a year and they're not super new. A lot of that is they just, haven't left the job that they're at, but still, like, there's lots of those. And I'd say like somewhere around 60 to 90,000, that range is more kind of normal, I think. Now, I don't know averages or standard deviation. This is just based on what I've seen. So your mileage may vary, but yeah, if you're over 100K, don't take it for granted. You are in a very advantageous position, relatively speaking. And if you treat your money right, then you can make that 100+ K go a really long way. It's hard when you're paying off student loans, of course. I remember that. But if you pay those off quickly and those aren't there anymore, makes a big difference. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. If you want more money advice, Go ask Dave Ramsey or someone.
Making $900K a year.
That's a lot of money. Oh, hold on. What am I looking at right now? The $900K a year, I have never met somebody that made $900K a year. That's the Primogen. I don't know if he made $900K a year or not. I've never heard him say. I would genuinely be surprised if a software engineer who's not at least an architect level or like principal engineer, one of those fancy titles, is making anywhere near that. Because, I mean, if you think about it, a lot of CEOs make maybe $1 million or $2 million a year. I can't imagine someone paying $900K to a developer. The principal engineers at Home Depot, when I worked there, at least to my knowledge, usually made like 2 or 3K. Or sorry, 200 or 300K, somewhere in that ballpark, maybe up to 400K. But like, they'd been there 20 years as a programmer and had worked their way up. So yeah, if you're new to programming, do not expect this kind of salary. It's super rare if it ever even happens, especially now, because our market's kind of flooded at the moment, because everybody for the past 20 years, everyone's like, oh, programming is a cushy, easy desk job where you make gajillions of dollars with basically no work. So everyone's going into it thinking it's easy money, which means we have a surplus of developers, and like, we are cogs in a machine now. If you're a developer, you're not like a special, unique worker at the company. You're one of thousands a lot of the time, or you're one of 7, but like, you're super replaceable unless you go out of your way to go above and beyond and make yourself irreplaceable. But yeah, don't expect 900K. Is this an ad? This is an ad.
So I can listen to
was he actually, was this guy sponsored by YouTube? He got sponsored by YouTube. That's crazy, dude. Good for him.
Is with the Vim Flex. When you use Vim, it elevates you to a higher plane of consciousness where you can look down upon the poor lost souls using tools like VS Code, IntelliJ, and Emacs.
It's true though. Dude, okay, so Vim is a whole thing. If you are in network engineering, or if you are regularly using Docker containers and things like that, usually you'll spin them up with Linux as the operating system in some form or another. And if you're using your terminal just all the time, then it makes sense to learn Vim. I have never actually met someone that uses Emacs. I know it's like a whole big debate, but everyone I know who is like hardcore enough to use either Vim or Emacs uses Vim. So if you know about Emacs, please let me know. I've never used it, so I've heard it's got lots of shortcut keys and all sorts of stuff like that. But yeah, Vim is really complicated to learn. I spent about 1.5 years working only in Vim, or I guess it was about a year. I had like dabbled in Vim before, but that was about it. And I had to use it for work, so I was using it day in, day out. By the end of a year, I got like okay at Vim, where I had decent muscle memory for moving around, switching between different modes and stuff. But it was really funny because for about a week or two, I went back to Visual Studio Code. I think I was working with a newer guy and he didn't understand Vim at all. And I was kind of getting him used to the team. And so in the introduction process, he was also pretty new to coding. So we started him out in Visual Studio Code and I was kind of guiding him through the process. And over that time, it was like the amount of mental effort that I didn't have to put into just making words come on onto the screen it was like a huge burden was lifted off of me. Vim is so much work. And it's cool, and you can do amazing stuff, and you can flex. And if you want to see it being awesome, just watch the Primogens channel. But yeah, I feel like the amount of cognitive load that you get from trying to use Vim until you are completely fluent in Vim is just not worth it. Like, and it's easily, now this part will vary widely from person to person. Some people it's just going to click. Other people, it'll take even longer. But it takes at least 6 months to get like kind of decent at it. And then after a year, you might be pretty good, but it's still like certain things are faster. Yes. But again, the amount of mental effort you have to put into doing simple things until you are completely fluent, which is easily going to be a year or two. I don't think the input is worth the output, with the exception being if it's kind of required for your work. Like, again, if you're doing networking stuff and you're constantly going between different Docker containers, and each Docker container has files that you're editing and stuff, very common in networking kind of scenarios or distributed computing kind of scenarios, cloud servers, all that stuff. If that's the kind of work you're doing, then Vim is kind of the only thing that makes sense, because you don't want to have to install Visual Studio Code or something on every single Docker container every time you open it. And you also can't always easily open something in a text editor that's not Vim, because Vim runs in your terminal. So anyway, that's a whole other thing. I'm not a networking expert, so I just kind of am tangentially familiar with that aspect of it. But yeah, I personally, if you are not in like distributed cloud networking stuff and you're not dealing with Docker containers or comparable, my personal recommendation is that unless you think it's really cool and want to just learn it because it's cool, stay away from Vim, because the input to output ratio is, I think, not worth the initial investment. If you put that same effort into getting faster at using other things, you're just going to get better at those other things instead of just at typing. I think that's a good way to summarize my opinion of Vim, is if you don't specifically need it for your work, which obviously changes it, then feel free to learn it if it's cool, obviously. But if you don't think it's super cool and you don't really need it for your work, it's basically a waste of time. Anyway, that's probably, I don't know how spicy that's going to be. Feel free to disagree with me.
If you want to tell people you're rich, go with a Macintosh.
Well, usually these days work provides the laptop, so it's more like, does the company want to give you fancy equipment or not? If you are coding on a Dell, by the way, you have my sympathy.
You also tell people that you're a clown. Real developers, though, use Linux. You can impress most people by simply using Ubuntu, but if you really want to impress people, you should pay a bunch of money to IBM to use Red Hat Enterprise Linux. That's pretty baller, but eventually you'll find yourself alone at a urinal. A man will walk in. He'll turn his head and look at you, then say these 3 words. I use Arch, by the way. You'll immediately feel smaller, like your distro is just not as well endowed as you thought. Not to worry, though, you're just getting flexed on by someone who doesn't have a life, who can spend countless hours configuring their OS.
Yeah, that is true. Now, it's one of those things, like, if you have mastered it, then cool. Use the thing you've mastered and feel free to flex about it. That's fine. Don't be a jerk, obviously, but it's okay to feel proud of things that are hard that you've accomplished. But yeah, Arch, again, like Vim, it's really just not worth it. I think the thing, most commonly, the people who are really experienced with Arch and stuff like that, it's usually like they started 30 or 40 years ago where that's kind of all there was. And so, like, what are you going to do? But these days we have so many tools to make it easier and to make programming less of a science and more of an art, which I need to do a video on because that makes some people really mad, apparently. But programming doesn't have to be completely scientific anymore. And it's kind of moving away from the science, I think, and moving more toward an art because of modern tooling. And I think that's a good thing. I think that makes it way easier for new people to come in and not just be obliterated by complexity. But that's a whole other conversation.
And your profile should have enough awards and badges on it to make you look like a North Korean general.
Real talk, I didn't even know about the badges. I don't care about badges in any of the social media things that I've interacted with that have them. I don't use GitHub as a social media at all. That's hilarious, though.
But what you do is pay your $8 to post on X, formerly known as Twitter, then make outrageous hot takes that nobody could possibly agree with.
That makes me laugh. Yeah, I don't like PHP. I know some people really, really like it. I know it's gotten a lot better since I first learned it, too. To be fair, though, JavaScript is kind of terrible, too. So maybe I should do an episode where I learn PHP, the new version.
If you give advice that's so egregiously bad, you might even get a reply from Elon Musk himself.
That's actually crazy that Elon Musk responded to him. Good for him, man. I think this is pretty true, too, with the exception that happiness does not come from alcohol. I strongly dispute that point. I have never seen anyone whose life is just objectively better because of alcohol. A lot of people think it is, but then the end result is much worse, and it's not really good for you anyway. So that's a whole other thing. there's nuance there. Feel free to yell at me in the comments if you think alcohol is the meaning of life. Yeah, there's a lot of truth to that. The interview system in the programming world is kind of ridiculous. It's data structures and algorithms is usually used as a test to see like how you interact with complex programming topics. Personally, I think the best way to learn if someone should be working with you, at least in programming. I can't speak for other careers. I think the best way is basically an apprenticeship where it's like, you can do some basic tests like, do you know how to code? Like, show me the process of you coding on something. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But then basically be like, okay, if you do like the person and if their personality is such that it won't ruin the team, at least as far as you can tell, do like an apprenticeship where they work with you, they get paid, but not as much for maybe like a month or two, kind of a test period, see if they actually work well with the team. And then at the end of that time, either they are a great fit and you're glad to have them on the team, so you keep them, or they're a bad fit. So you just let them know that, they're not going to grow well in this team. They don't mesh well and they should find work elsewhere. And I think not just dropping that on them necessarily, like expect that they'll be applying to other places too and stuff like that during that time, because it's a test for both of you to see if you want to work together. I think that would be a lot better. Now, what I've just described definitely needs some refinement and you would have to tweak it for your exact scenario and stuff. But I think an apprenticeship model, or at least something resembling an apprenticeship model, I think that would be a lot more effective at finding programmers that fit with your team, can work well with your team. And I've seen it work well as well. But I don't think really anybody would disagree. Maybe you will, I don't know. But I don't think anybody would disagree with the statement that the modern programming world interview system of finding new programmers for work is kind of just terrible. It doesn't really work well. It produces a really high turnover rate. You have people who join jobs that they hate and then leave. You have people who join jobs that hate them and so kick them out. It's a broken system. And so I think trying something new would probably be good. Now, people are also going to break any system you throw at them, so it's not like it would be perfect. But for me personally, I would certainly lean more toward an apprenticeship kind of thing rather than give me your resume and then I will see if you have the right keywords on there and then interview you 17 times and then maybe make a decision. It's a bad process. Let me know if you want to... Weird place to pause it, but let me know if you want to see a video talking more about that. I think it's a very relevant topic in today's society as a whole, but also in today's tech community with the layoffs we've had over the past few years, with just kind of the way the tech industry is going right now. Yeah, let me know if you're interested in that kind of thing.
The ultimate flex a programmer can do, though, is learn to farm. The programmer who blows up his computer and joins the Amish is invincible to all the flexes we've looked at throughout this video. As he milks his cow and tends to his crops, his identity is no longer tied to these superficial things.
Oh, that was good. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope I gave some useful commentary. Let me know what you think in the comments below, whether you agree or disagree or whatever. If you hate what I said, that's fine. I don't hate you. I think you are, I don't know if you're a wonderful person, but I think you're a valuable person and I hope your life is great or at least gets better. Anyway, that was a tangent. Yeah, thanks for watching this far. If you're still here, wow, you're cool. YouTube thinks you would like some of these videos too. Maybe give them a try. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and all that stuff. Let me know in the comments if there are any of these topics you want to see me explore more. And I do my best to respond to all the comments. So I'm not always the fastest, but I do check it and I do see what you say. So I hope you have a great day and bye, I guess. Yeah, I'll see you later.